It's a warm welcome from myself. I'm James Pope. I'm the founder of HeadsUp, and in the room I'll do some introductions to some other people in a minute, but you should be able to see Kate Smith on the screen somewhere. Kate gives you a quick wave, you can wave back to her. So Kate is the project leader for HeadsUp. She's the one who does all of our marvellous comms stuff and has done all of the sort of organisation around making sure that you've had all of the information that you need over the course of the last couple of weeks to be here tonight. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about HeadsUp, and then that'll ease us into the agenda for this evening, and I'll do some introductions for some fantastic people who are going to do some presentations for us and lead us through the evening. HeadsUp as a network started 18 months ago as an idea in Patrick Otley O'Connor's school in Liverpool, in North Liverpool Academy, and was, I suppose, was a reaction partly to my experience of being a head teacher and my experience of going through that process over a period of 4 years. So I'm James Pope, formerly a secondary head teacher and also an exec head teacher in a primary school. And I had a fairly sort of challenging and bumpy time through headship, to say the least. If you were unfortunate enough 2 years ago, almost to the day, to catch a BBC Two series called School, you will have seen bits of that over 2 episodes. Here I am 2 years later, with very much focused on supporting head teachers. So 18 months ago, the idea for HeadsUp started. And it's transpired, we've had contact from lots of head teachers. It's transpired that actually there are lots of head teachers in the system for whom the system has not been, let's put it politely, which we don't normally do in a HeadsUp setting, but we'll put it politely and say that the system has not been particularly kind to them or treated them particularly humanely. And the HeadsUp network is growing, and it's grown particularly over the course of the last 7 months. And it has grown through the pandemic, with the pandemic. And it started off, we started running coffee mornings back in March when the school first went into lockdown, schools first went into lockdown as a reaction to the fact that we had to cancel our conference, what was our second conference. So we started running coffee mornings, and the network's grown out of that. So our mission is to enable head teachers and school leaders to be the leaders that they set out to be. That's what we are aiming to achieve. We provide crisis coaching for head teachers who are really struggling because we don't want them to. We do that for free. We offer as many calls as a head teacher needs to give them the support that they need to help get them sort of back into a better place. And we run 2 weekly support sessions, one on a Wednesday evening, which this is replacing this evening, and one on a Saturday morning. And we create spaces that there are people in the room who are in them, so they can contradict me if they wish to, but we create spaces that are safe and where people can be their honest and true selves, and they can bring that to the space without fear of judgment. We aim to be supportive. We aim to celebrate the role of leaders in our education system. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we also aim to challenge the education system, which is creating some of these toxic environments for some of the people who work in it. That's led us to a sort of wonderful partnership with Big Change. And Caitlin Ross is in the room, is going to give us a wave. And Big Change published December, January, they published something called Their Hopes for Ed. And there are 10 of them. And we've themed these events around, or the events that we're running on Wednesday evenings, we've themed those around the Big Change 10 Hopes for Ed, because they very much resonate and their values aligned with where HeadsUp are at. It's also led us in partnership to a partnership with Apogo. And we have Justin and Nilakshi from Apogo. They're going to give us a wave at the top of the screen. And led us in partnership with them because they have been creating and curating documents and video clips and information from thought leaders and within the system into something called the New Normal EdBook. And again, that resonates with us a lot. It sort of fits in a lot with what we feel should be happening in the education system. It aligns really nicely with Big Change Hopes for Ed. So we thought we'd kick off our series of big change events with this event, which is very much focused on a broad view of what we might see in a new normal education system. What are our desires? And part of that is about saying, quite often we hear from head teachers that, well, nobody asks us, nobody talks to us. And that's because you're all really, really busy people and you've got your heads down and you're getting on with the jobs. And so, you know, we want to make Heads Up, or, you know, part of the system whereby head teachers can say, actually, do you know what, we had our voice and we had our say. So this evening, hopefully, we will very much hear from you in the chat room, using the chat room function. We are recording this event, which is unusual for us in the Heads Up community because of that safe space. But we are recording this event. So if you are swigging beer or drinking wine, then we have that on camera. I am sorry about that. That's mostly, we may use little clips from things that people say during the meeting. We may use little clips of what people have said, but it's also so that we can sort of pull a transcript from it later on, and we can publish materials off the back of this conversation and this dialogue. So I think I've talked a little bit about housekeeping. If my Zoom feed fails, then we're all in trouble. If your Zoom feed fails, then please just log yourself back in again and somebody will let you back into the room, so don't worry too much about it. And just to re-emphasize, it is a really informal space. Our Heads Up spaces are informal, they are relaxed. I do sit here with a beer. It's the first Zoom call of the day. I've done 5 today. It's the first one I've had an alcoholic beverage at. So my reputation remains intact. What's left of it remains intact anyway. So it's a huge welcome to you all. Really pleased to see familiar faces and new faces. And if you want to find out more about the Heads Up network, then please do visit our website. Great. I think that's it in terms of introduction. So I am going to start talking about the education system, and this is partly my thoughts, but it's partly the sort of collation of things that head teachers have been telling us in the Heads Up network over the course of the last sort of 7 or 8 months. Some of them may be slightly provocative. I don't know, it'll be interesting. If you are provoked, pop something in the chat, respond. If you think I'm bang out of order, pop something in the chat, respond. We are that kind of community. So, you know, this is very much about hearing from you and hearing what you've got to say. But there's been a lot of talk over the last 9 months. There's been a lot of talk about the trouble and the hardship and the difficulty and the impact of coronavirus and COVID-19. And yes, that is absolutely right and proper. And oh my gosh, if you are a school leader or a teacher or a support member of staff in schools, or you know somebody, or you are a head teacher and a leader and you've been leading a community through the last 9 months, I take my hat off, if I had one, to you. And I don't think there's anywhere near enough recognition of the role that schools have played in this pandemic time. And I say that really deliberately and quite slowly. I don't think there's enough recognition that schools play in our communities in normal times, if I'm brutally honest about it. I think we are on the receiving end and have been probably for over a decade. I say a decade, normally I think it's over a decade, of a wave of negative rhetoric and a wave of negativity about what we do in the education system. And I think it's created a culture where we spend all of our time focused on what do we need to improve, what do we need to develop, what's not working. We often talk in Heads Up meetings about, if you are head teachers in the room, remembering results days. Results days are a really interesting time in schools because, let's face it, they are a sort of specific feedback loop for how wonderful your year has been. And what do we do on those results days? We look at the results and we spend probably about 24 seconds celebrating the great work that we did with the children who did really, really well. And then we spend the next 12 months analysing the children who didn't do very well and focusing on all of the things that didn't work. And one of the things that might be quite provocative, you might disagree with me, but one of the things that might be provocative, my view is that 80 to 90% of what happens in our schools on a daily basis is blooming brilliant. It is education. It's interactions between young people and young people and staff with each other. And it's amazing, but we're missing it all. It's passing us by because we're forced to be focused on the things that aren't working. We haven't developed that yet. We haven't solved that yet. We haven't got a solution for that yet. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things, but what we mustn't do is allow the narrative, the counterculture of we're not doing very well to become defining for us as an education system. And that's very much where Heads Up is at. It's about saying, actually, let's reflect on the inspirational moment. So I'm going to ask you, we do this every Wednesday and every Saturday at Heads Up meetings. I'm going to ask you to spend 30 seconds. I want you to think of one inspirational thing or one positive thing that's happened for you in the last week. And it might be in school, it might be outside of school. Normally I'd ask you to share them with me, but there's too many of you to do that and we'd be here all night. But just hold that in your head. And it's really interesting because I've just asked that question and I can't see everybody on the screen in front of me, but I can see a good majority of the people on the screen in front of me. And about of the 30 people on the screen in front of me, about 25 of them just burst into a smile. Because when we think about positive things and the inspirational things and the impact that we have, it lifts us. It makes us feel better about the world. And so I think we're at a position that's been exaggerated by the pandemic, where we need to step into a space where we take ownership and control back of our education system, and we celebrate the great work that's happening in it every day. I don't know which composer it was, because I can't remember off the top of my head. I did look it up for somebody else about 3 weeks ago, but there's a composer who talks about music, and he says that music isn't the notes. Music is the space between the notes. And education isn't the exams. It's not the Ofsted judgment. It's all of the myriad of complex things that happen in the space in between. And our problem is if we become overly focused on the outcomes and the results. And I can say with some pride that the Heads Up Network doesn't do that. The head teachers and the leaders in the Heads Up Network are values aligned, passionate, human focused, values led educationalists. And I think they're representative of 95, 96, 97, 98% of the education system. So I think there's enough in our shared values where we can refocus onto an education system which is recognizing that we're dealing with a human industry. It's not about the numbers. It is about the numbers, but it's not ultimately. And we shouldn't get lost in that story. So that's what Heads Up is all about. The new normal EdBook starts to dive into that in some significant detail. And I'm going to invite in a second. It has a series of chapters. It came out with the invite, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at it in advance. We think it's a great piece of work. It's a collation of lots of interesting thoughts and ideas, hopefully that have provoked your thinking. But I think there are enough agents in the system who are supportive of the notion that the world is changing and education needs to change with it. Not because education isn't working, but because we're heading to a different future and we're heading for a different world, and our education system needs to reflect that. I think too much of the change we look for in education is because, oh, that's not working, so let's change it. I think that's nonsense. I think what we should be doing is coming from a position of strength. Do you know what? 80, 90% of what we do is absolutely blooming fantastic. But we're going to change from that position, and that's a positive thing to happen on behalf of our young people. So I hope that over tonight's event, but over the course of the next 5 months on these events, we hear from you. We hear your voice, either in the chat room, or if you're brave enough to shout up and unmute yourself, go, yeah, I believe that, I'm with you, I'm jumping on that soapbox too, then come along on the journey with us. And there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to do so. But that's what tonight's all about. What does a brave new world of education look like? Not defined by the DFE, not defined by Ofsted, not reductive. What does it look like from our point of view? Because let's face it, there are enough of us, 33,000 head teachers in this country. There are enough of us to significantly make a difference if we come at that together. Anyway, that's my ranty kind of soapboxy introduction to this session. I'm now going to hand over to the wonderful Diana Asagi, who is on my screen. She's a chess move away. She's a knight's chess piece away from where I am. So I'm going to hand over to Diana, because Diana's chapter in the EdBook is all about leadership, and obviously I've touched on some of the themes in that, but Diana's going to go into that in much more depth. So Diana, it's a great pleasure that you could join us this evening. Really pleased to see you, and the floor is yours.
Hi everyone.
Hi Diana.
Goodness me, 7:20, we're still on Zoom. We're dedicated, aren't we?
Hardcore.
You know the ones where people say, oh, you get loads of holidays, don't you? They don't see this part of the job, do they? Where we've done a full day's work, supporting, developing, training and what have you. And then we log on in the evening for CPD, whatever. You know, I did a keynote speech this morning for the School Business Managers, School Business Professionals National Conference. And I told them something I'm going to tell you. And some of the people burst out crying, which wasn't quite my intention when you do the keynote speech, right? So I'm hoping it doesn't happen now, okay? I don't think I could handle it if I had all of you guys crying. But what I said to them was this: you're not just head teachers. You're not principals or vice principals or education consultants. That's a title that indicates your skill. What you are captains in the army of change. That's what you actually are. Are you hearing me? Sharifa, can you hear me? So when someone says to you, what do you do for a living? Don't say, I'm a head teacher. I'm a recently retired head teacher. Say, I'm a captain in the army of change, and then salute them. Watch them step away from you like you're a nutter. But what you are saying to them, this is what you do. And I think the way we take back what we have given away, actually, the way we take back the stance of leadership that we actually hold is by recognizing what we do. James used the word reductive, because sometimes we reduce what we do to a word: head teacher, vice principal, consultant, coach, mentor. But actually what I do is longer than a word. So therefore you're going to have to spend a little bit of time listening to when I tell you what I do. Here's what I do. I hold the door open for this nation to become something great. That's what I do. I haven't finished yet, you tell the person as they're about to walk away, think that you have lost your mind. You say, this is what also I do. I ensure that society is able to continue, that society is able to flourish and to thrive by making sure the nation's children are not just educated, but they are confident, articulate, able, and ready to take their place in society. If you're in early years, you are the vanguard of the nation. It starts with you. If you guys get it wrong, we play catch up for decades. If you're in primary school, when young people are in primary, that is when their essence, their being is formed. If you guys get it wrong, we are playing catch up and repair all of their life. And if you're in secondary, you've got to bring it home. You've got to finish the race. If you get it wrong, especially for those kids who are vulnerable, for whatever reason they are vulnerable, let's just take those who we label pupil premium. I was a pupil premium child. In those days, you were just called free school meals, giving you a ticket to go and get your dinner. We didn't know it meant other things to be free school meals, but now we have an idea and we call it disadvantaged. But if you at secondary level get it wrong, those disadvantaged children become disadvantaged adults who become disadvantaged grandparents, and then they die. So do you see now, you're not head teachers, you are more than that. But you have to understand your own worth and describe it and articulate it to everyone you meet, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in every paper you write, in every school document. It must be saturated with the essence of what you actually do. Otherwise, you enable the reductiveness of the narrative about our profession. So people think I've got a big mouth. I have. Do you understand? So when you say to people, I captain in the army of change, because this nation cannot progress unless we get it right, because it starts with us. There are no lawyers, doctors, astronauts, politicians, nurses, unless they come through the education system. It all begins with us. Go and visit a country where the education system has failed. Then you will see how society crumbles quickly. Nothing can work. That is how crucial we are. So when I talk to leaders, when I'm talking about leadership, I'm not talking about the processes that we do, the procedures that we have, the CPD that we put on, the coaching and the mentoring. I'm talking about a mindset. I'm talking about a way of being, that we're not ashamed to talk about it in this language. If you don't boast about yourself, if you don't blow your own trumpet, who's going to come along and be blowing your trumpet for you? It sounds rude, but don't let people put their mouth on your trumpet. Blow your own trumpet. Do you see? Goodness me, I know it is tough right now. And I don't know when this toughness will go and be replaced by a different kind of toughness. But leaders, we cannot afford to fold. Young people's lives are at stake. So we have to find a new normal. We can't keep doing the same old, otherwise we will all burn out. And our staff and our schools will crumble beneath us. But we have to find a new normal and engage in a new narrative. Does that sound something like it would be interesting to you? Now, when I say we is a small word, but goodness me, it's an important one, because it's not Diana's new normal or James's or even this group. We contribute to a national narrative, and we say to every head in your network, why are you not contributing to this national narrative? Now, if Paula knows 10 heads and Jane knows 15 and Chris knows 20, we amplify the narrative. Whether we agree with each other or not is not the point. We need to start talking, planning, and pushing forward to our new normal. I don't know what that looks like. I don't have a panacea, a utopia, a magic bullet. But I do know that between us, we'll get there. It's going to take that collective effort. One more thing to do. But goodness me, if we don't do this, we will miss this zeitgeist. You can feel things are changing in the world. Can't you feel that? For goodness sake, Donald Trump lost the election. I would have put my mortgage on it that that man was going to win again. Because if a nation can vote that bloke in, they're voting me a second time. Because he's always been that way. It wasn't though he got in and started being weird. He's always been like that. You can feel the zeitgeist changing. Kamala Harris is in power. You can feel it changing. Jacinta Ardern's in power. You can feel it changing. We are taking big companies and holding them to account. Amazon can't just do as they please. Facebook were in front of the disciplinary committee for the parliament. We are holding people to account on an international, things are changing, shifting. A year ago, if I'd said to you, GCSEs would have been cancelled, you'd have said, Diana, you've lost your mind. A year ago, if I'd said to you, Jasmine, you're going to be delivering lessons to your children by Zoom, you'd have said, Diana, you've lost your mind. Within 3 weeks, schools went from classroom-based to what? We're in the cloud. I never knew there was a cloud. Suddenly, we're teaching year 6 by Zoom. So don't tell me it's not possible. Don't tell me it's not possible. So in your mind, on your paper, on your notebook, write down one thing. I would love to see this in the future of education. Over the next 5 years, this is what I would love to see. There are 32 of us on screen. I'm going to give you what I would love. Pop it in the chat, says Kate. Thank you, Kate. I would love to see every governing body and head teacher of every school in the country committed to diversifying their leadership team. Women, ethnic groupings, religion, sexuality. I'd love to see a commitment and a full step forward that every senior team across the land is committed to diversifying. Why? It's the right thing to do. 2, because being diversified is your strategic advantage. And I want our schools to have advantage. It's been proven time and time again in industry that if you have diversity at your leadership table, your company has advantage over other companies. They're talking about money and the bottom line. We're talking about young people's lives. That's what I would like to see. So I put my hand to the plow to try and bring that about. So now what do you want, Paula, Sharifa, Michelle, Caitlin, Kelly, Audrey? Tell us in the chat what you want to see. Because together we make these, it's not dreams coming true. We know how to make things happen. If COVID has taught us anything, is that we know how to get things done. So, in the leadership chapter of the EdBook, goodness me, sometimes I forget to go in there and update the thing. I need you to come in and put in there what you want to see. It's not Diana's chapter, it's your narrative. And then you talk about it. When you're talking to your union, you talk about it. When you're on Twitter, when you're on LinkedIn, you talk about this. And in your school, in your part of the world, you make it happen. You make it happen. So now if Patsy changes her part of the world and Mags does her part and Balgit does hers and Paula does hers and Stephanie and Shireen do theirs, slowly but surely we begin to change the face of education. It's not a huge movement at DFES level. It's in every school, around every leadership table. Then you join together across your mat, across your federation, across your borough. And before you know it, things start changing. That's how these things happen. That's how these things happen. Is it a grassroots movement? No, we're not in the grass, we're leadership. We are captains in the army of change. Yes? So now you know. Now I've said to you, don't call yourself head teacher anymore. I've just promoted you all into the army. See yourself as critical to this nation. Will the government ever see you like that? Hell no. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I don't wait for someone to tell me I'm fabulous. I know I'm fabulous. I start walking in my fabulosity long before someone says, oh, by the way, I think you're really good. You're late. You are, as a year 11 saying, oh, miss, you're late, man. I'm trying to encourage you. I'm trying to ask you just to receive a door to a different mindset about who you truly are. Ashley, you're not a head teacher. You're a captain in the army of change. Captains, oh, we do things differently. So, is it in the chat there? I can see there's 40 things that I didn't read. Kate, have you got them? This is what they want to see over the next 5 years. We start working. We start working. The next time this group meets, bring a friend. Bring 2 friends. Tell them, you know what, I'll give you pizza, you just got to come. They've got to come. So today's 34, next time will be 68, and we just keep going until there are so many on here who have said what they want to see and are working towards it in their part of the nation. That's how we change things. The new normal is ours for the taking, ours for the creating. It won't happen unless we put our hand to this plow. I know you're with me. I can see your faces. I know you're with us. We're together on this one. James, they're together on this one. Justin, totally. We're together on this one. We're there. We're going to do it.
Can we get a huge heads up round of applause for Diana, please? And the energy,
you guys,
is just incredible. Diana, I just whenever I hear you talk, I just completely resonate somewhere deep inside me. What was really interesting is really bizarre, but I was looking at the chat as you were saying that, and people were writing down their vision for where education is going to be in 5 years' time. And I didn't see anybody write, I want the Progress 8 score to go from plus 0.2 to plus 0.4. I didn't see anybody writing something down about the SATs results improving. And it's really interesting because part of that reductive space, and I do, Diana, the stuff that resonates with me, I've got 4 kids and they span the education system. I've got a child in year 1. His early years found out his reception year was obviously disrupted last year. And I've got a daughter, my son's in year 1, and I've got a daughter who is about to head into year 11. So I think there's a danger sometimes that we look at the longer term view of education as, it's over there. It's all the way over there. Don't need to worry about that yet. It's here. It's in our schools. My son will be going into year 11 in the year 2030, in 10 years' time. My biggest fear, he will experience exactly the same version of year 11 that my daughter is currently experiencing. In 10 years' time, will be the same. And Diana, some of the things that resonated with me in what you said, I think we've been held in a space whereby we spend all of our time arguing about progressive, traditional, academies, not academies, curriculum like this, curriculum like that. And there is some sense in that argument, but it's all about the what. Whenever we get a group of head teachers together in a space like this and we focus on the why, as you've just led us through, funnily enough, it's not about Progress 8 scores going up. If you read it, it's all about community, belonging, being part of, helping disadvantaged, focusing on those things that are important in our communities. And those things we can have absolute agreement around. Our values are aligned around those things. We can agree about those things. But we can agree about it, I reckon, at 96, 97, 90% of the system. So let's make our argument about those things. So great input, Diana, as ever. Hopefully stimulated loads of thoughts. There's loads of stuff we can pick out of that chat and discuss. So thank you ever so much for that. But If you disagree with Diana, pop it in the chat as well. We're more than happy to have challenge and conflict. But I just mentioned in that this notion of belonging. And my God, don't we need that at the moment? Thrown into a space of digitalization. I spend my life in here staring at this screen, literally 12 hours a day. I'm sad. We need contact. We need to feel a sense of belonging. Jasmine, you put something in the chat earlier on about people who are more affected. That everything's a spectrum, and some people have been much more affected by the pandemic than others. And Jasmine, we may come back to, Arv may touch on some of those things, but we may come back to the point that you raised in there. We need all of our society to come out of this together. And to do that, we need to build a sense of belonging and being part of something which applies to everybody. Everybody has permission to belong. Everybody has permission to belong in our society. It's not defined by any one group of people, and it's not decided by any one group of people, or it's not decided by whatever that might be. We all have the chance. And I've said it really badly, but another chapter in the New Normal Ed book, which is collated and curated and put together by the wonderful Arv, who is also joining us in the room, is all about belonging, and he will put it way, way better than I just have. So Arv, that was a really bad introduction to you. So Arv, talk to us about belonging, talk to us about your chapter in the Ed book and why that's important to you. You're muted, Arv.
The first thing is that, you know, I've never used Zoom before, so I wouldn't know. I'm new to this game. The first thing, I wish I really had a choice in the order that we were speaking, because I know that we're going through a pandemic. I know things are really, really tough and challenging, but to come on after Diana, I think has even topped that. And I never thought I'd find myself in the position where I would be in speaking after you, Diana. Having listened to you so many times. Yeah, working with Apogo, working with Justin and Alakshi over the last few months, and the idea of the new Ed book, and thinking about what things needed to be included in there. And there's lots of things that are going on in society, things that have happened in the last 6 months to do with Black Lives Matter, to do with George Floyd and the reaction and the momentum that's created. But the work has been going on for many years. I mean, I feel a little bit of an imposter, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But in terms of my journey was a lot later than some people that are here, and I can see names, and it's really good to see some really familiar names there that have been working on these types of agendas for many years. And for me, coming into it almost at the 11th hour, if we're looking at today's 12 o'clock, I do feel a tiny bit of an imposter, and that's something that again resonates. So when I start talking about this with colleagues, you find out there is such a vast array of colleagues that come from different backgrounds, and it all comes down to do we feel this sense of belonging in terms of where we work and how we interact with each other. So I'm just going to pause right there. I'm just going to give you something to think about. So my father, born in 1934, so that's pre-partition in India, was part of the moving from one side of India to the other side while he's in his teenage years. Grandparent, uncles were teachers. He grew up, he educated himself and became a teacher himself. And then in 1957, he married my mother. He was betrothed to my mother before my mother was born, by the way, because grandparents, and they knew each other, and they said, right, if you have a daughter next, she's going to marry my son. That's basically it. That's what happened. And so in 1957 they got married. In 1963 my dad had an opportunity to come to England and set up a new life here. It's part of this big drive to get more skilled people in here, or labour in here, because we had a labour shortage. So he came here in 1963. My sister was 3 years old at the time, and my brother was about 8 months old at the time. And this is the days before internet, before phone lines as we have them now, mobile technology, all the rest of it. So you can imagine being apart from family with that distance was quite tough. In the 4 years when he left, and then when my mother finally joined him with my brother and my sister, he discovered that he couldn't be a teacher because his qualifications weren't recognized here. So he ended up working in a factory not too far away from where I am now, which is in Bedford. And my mother also worked there, and they both worked there for on and off for about 30 odd years. I was born in 1970, so I was the first person that was born here in my generation in England. And my siblings, my parents, my uncles, my cousins, all born in India. For the first 15 years of my life, my father had a packed suitcase under his bed. He said, when asked about this, one day they're going to ask us to leave. That was a fear that my parent and people of his generation had. And for me, for the first 15 years of my life, that was always an image that I had at the back of my mind. And then obviously, for me, being born here, I'm like thinking, well, I'm English, I'm British, I was born here, they're not going to ask me to leave. Not that you can go, but I'll stay. But in terms of, I found that quite a preposterous idea. Now, 1963, for those of you who remember, was the era of Enoch Powell with the Rivers of Blood speech that he did. And my father came into the UK at that time. So that was his initiation into coming to the wonderful golden pavements of this new land, and to be faced by that, and to be sitting on a park bench in 1964, crying because he felt he let his family down, and getting a tap on the shoulder from somebody who said, why are you crying? My dad said, look, I can't find a job. My family are far away from me. I miss them. They can't come here until I get myself settled. And the guy saying to him, well, I'm a manager at a factory locally. Why don't you come and see me tomorrow? And my dad worked there from 1964, 65 until 1993 when the factory closed. That man became like my white uncle. And he was very much part of the narrative as I was growing up. He was there at functions, he was there, you know, and that was a lifelong friendship. And I was like thinking to myself, well, what would have happened if that moment hadn't occurred? And then I start thinking about, did my father ever feel like he really belonged here? Because he always had this romantic notion of one day I'm going to go back. And my mum slapped him down and said, what are you going to go back to? You know, it's a very different country that we left. And for me, I found it really difficult growing up, being torn between being this British Asian child in school and going home to a very authentic Indian home. And I had that for a big chunk of my early years. And you're going to think, that's part of my story. Now, as head teachers, as people that work in schools, we have got a range of people that have different stories to tell, that have influenced who they are. And what we've really got to think about as leaders is that, are we getting the most out of those people by not knowing them? Because quite often people will know me by the jobs that I've done, my CV. Do they know actually what drives me? Do they know the barriers that I've faced? Do they know how to get the most out of me? Have they spent the time to do that? Do they have the time to do that? Fast forward through my uni years, etc., I started to think that I needed to fit in. If I didn't fit in, I can't be like those people that I see that I want to be. I can't be them until I'm like them. Now, at the time, naively, I still believed in that it was a meritocracy. And I didn't join the teaching profession until 13 years ago. So this is all in the business world. And I thought, okay, if I work hard, I will get there. I will wear the right clothes. I will speak English in the right way. I will act the right way. I'll party the right way. I'll do all those things in the right way, because then I will be like you and I won't stand out, to the point where I'd wear a watch on holiday so that I could show my suntan off when I got back. Because I used to get absolutely frustrated that people come back from holiday and they've got a slight tan and they go, oh, look at your tan. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm about 10 shades darker. I've just been to Turkey where it's 45 degrees and you haven't noticed my tan. So I used to wear a watch so I could come back and say, look at my tan. And I look back at that and I'm partly embarrassed, feel slightly shallow, but that was my way of thinking how I could fit in. Fast forward a little bit more, joined the education sector in 2007, thinking I'm going to leave the business world. I just don't feel there was no moral purpose in there for me anymore. I didn't feel that drive. And I'm thinking I'm going to enter this noble profession. And for the first 10 years, I was like, yeah, this is it. This is absolutely it. But I had walked in using the same lens that I'd used in the business world, thinking that this is a meritocracy. If I work hard, I will do well. And you have a coping strategy. Because if you really see the horror around you, no matter what it is, whether it's a car accident, whatever it is, if you really look at it, you are traumatized on a daily basis. And that is tiresome. So you end up having these coping mechanisms. And again, as leaders, as head teachers, do you know what your staff are going through on a daily basis? What they're having to cope with, what they have now chosen to ignore so they can just cope every day when they come into school. And I'm not saying the places where we've got a range of head teachers here, primary through to secondary, I can see that. I'm not saying that your schools, you've got people walking around shielding and not being who they are, but do you actually know whether they are or not? Have you created the environment where you allow that to come out so that you can have those discussions, those people feel safe and secure to have those conversations? And do you think that's a valuable thing to do? So why did I end up doing what I'm doing now? When I moved back. I lived in Kent for 20 odd years. So I moved back to the Bedfordshire area, primarily because, as I said, my father passed away and my mum still lives here, and ended up working in a school in Luton, which is a predominantly Muslim school. It's an all-girls school. And I walked in, I just thought, wow, I'm not used to this, because Kent is a very white area, the place that I worked in, and to come into the school where I think it's about 99.3% not white, the staff, the students in the school. And I thought, wow, this is going to be really interesting. I am going to learn so much, and it's going to be such a rich culture. And I found out it's quite sanitized. It was really sanitized. It's almost like their culture had been bleached out of it. Apart from they were wearing the hijabs, there was prayer rooms, etc. But in terms of were things celebrated in the same way? Were things different? No, they weren't. It's almost like the structure had been put in place to help these students. So I thought, okay, that works. It obviously works for them. That's fine. And then 2 months into my new role, I was handed this project, which is an equality and diversity project within education. I remember saying to my boss at the time, or now, Sufyan, I said to him, equality and diversity issues in education, what are you talking about? This is how blind I was to the whole situation. And this is why I feel like a slight imposter, because I know I'm surrounded by people that have been working on this for years. But I spent the next 6 months reading every single report to put this bid together. I read every single article that I possibly could do. And I didn't sleep for the majority of those 6 months thinking, how can this information exist and nobody have done anything about it? I couldn't reconcile those two things. I was in this noble profession, and it was shown that there was, whether it's systematic issues or systemic issues, or I don't know what the issues were. And I was like thinking, why are people not progressing from certain backgrounds? And why hasn't it been addressed? We are in a noble profession. The whole halo effect, I'm a teacher, I'm in education. I don't do any wrong. I am a good person. I am not a racist. I don't have biases. I will tell you one thing. I am racist. I have biases. I know what they are. I'm aware of them, and I make sure they don't affect my decisions. I can't help the prejudices that I have. I can't. But I do know that they exist, and I know what they are, and I try and mitigate the effects of those on a daily basis. And that's me being completely honest with you. And if anybody sits there saying, I don't have any, I don't have those emotions, when I see an image come up, it doesn't give, I don't have a reaction to it, I think it's something that you really need to have a good reflection about. If we have those biases, then how does that come through? I mean, recently, I think there's an article by Yasmin, I think it's on the BBC, which is to do with Asian prejudices and South Asian prejudices towards Black people. Yeah, I grew up with that. I knew that I had family members that used to look upon people from the Black community in a very different light to people from different communities. I know that. I'm aware of that. I'm ashamed of that time, but that's not me. I'm aware of it. And I will deal with it, and I'll talk about it openly. I won't say that, oh, I'm holier than thou. So I had that huge challenge. So when you start looking at this, you're thinking, okay, there is a moral purpose to it. And I know that, and everybody knows there's a moral purpose to being fair, to have equity, to look after people in their own way. But you're thinking, I've got 101 things to do as a head teacher or as a leader within an education, and I just don't have time to do that, which is the first thing I want you to, as leaders, think about. What stops you embedding any kind of practice within your school? Or what should I say? What stops you putting it on the agenda as a permanent item? Because I know that I've read over 80 now equality policies from schools around England and not seen one actionable thing that's happened as a result of them since 2016. So that's the first thing. What stops us doing that? The next point I want to get to is that I stood there in an assembly of 99.3%. I think there's a couple of kids that had a white leg, or I don't know what it was, but there wasn't 100% totally non-white, but there was an element there. And my leadership team, by the way, is all white. The staff structure is about 40% non-white, and middle management is about 25-30%. Leadership team, none. And I've got to think, is that just a moment in time, or is that something that's always happened? And when I look back, that's the way it's always been. And then you start looking at the schools around you, especially in an area like Luton, where the community is in such contrast to the leadership that you find within schools. There's schools that have literally no non-white staff, yet their students are from those backgrounds. And you're going to think, how could you be standing there and saying, sky is the limit to these children, the sky is the limit? And I stood there in assembly to inspire these year 11 girls before they go off on their journey, saying, your exam results are only part of it. The sky is the limit. You can achieve whatever you set your heart. And I'm in the back of my mind thinking, as long as you don't want to be a leader in education, because those positions are already taken. I sat there with one of the senior leaders, and she's talking about my career. And I said, statistically speaking, I will never be in your shoes. And she said, oh, don't be like that. I said, look, let's look at this. Let's look at the leadership structure that we've got here. Tell me, where have you ever seen value in anybody from different backgrounds being in our leadership teams? And the powerful image that I want to leave you with is, if you as a head teacher, if you had one teacher who had a class of 30 every single year, and 50% of them were from one background and 50% were from another background, and only one half of that class ever succeeded, would you tackle that teacher and say, what's going on in your classroom? What is going on in your classroom where only these people ever do well? I know we have the skills to do this because we do this on a daily basis. And as Diana's alluded to, and we've spoken about this before, the strength that our leadership teams have shown over the last 6 months is immense. One day we are face to face with our students. The next day we are told, you can't do that anymore. And you've got to turn your whole systems upside down. And within a week, near enough every school up and down the country had flipped the way that they did education. So when you are asked to do it, and as Justin said to me, when you're standing on this burning bridge, you know you have to act, and you have to act fast. And you've shown that you can do it. So my question is that where has the reluctance been? When you look at your own teams, where have you said, when have you said to them about staffing and their development within your organization? When have you said, why haven't we got these people that are our heads of departments, why are they never progressing? And what space have you created for that to happen within your schools? So the chapter that I'm looking at is a lot of it is going to be based on stories, to be fair, in terms of, I think the more we understand each other, the more we want to connect with each other. I think that's an absolute certain. During the lockdown, when actually I met more people than I do when I'm working, in terms of face-to-face, I'll see about, and I'll go to 5 different classrooms in 5 different bubbles, and I rarely see my department. And when I was on lockdown, I met so many different people. So the ability to connect with people really, really strengthens the drive to do anything that you want to achieve. And I know it's tough, but what stops us doing that? And I think that's the nub of it, really. What stops us putting this on the agenda within our schools? What makes us think that these 10 items are more important than making your staff feel they belong where they work? I'm not even going to talk about the business cases. We've got a retention crisis. We've got a recruitment crisis. We've got a disproportionate people amount leaving the profession from certain backgrounds. Can we afford not for that to continue? What are we doing to attract those people to come back to us who felt disaffected in some way? And I can probably say that there's probably not many heads that are listening to this now that haven't had challenges to do with cover, to do with staffing in the last 6 months, let alone the last 4 or 5 years, with all the budget constraints that we've had. And to replace a member of staff that's left, we know how difficult that is. What are we doing to bring that back in to the fold and finding out the reasons why they don't feel they belong within our schools? Because that's the choice they've made. They've had a degree, they've educated, they've trained as a teacher, they've come into the profession, they've gone through NQT, they've done the first 2, 3, 4 years, and we know the dropout rate in the first 2 to 3 years for NQTs is huge. What are we doing in our schools that's making these people feel that this isn't the place for them? And part of that has got to be that they don't feel they fit in or they don't see a future. And I'll leave you with one quote. If you don't see value in me, how could you ever say that you can see value in the students that look like me? And that's the whole emphasis of my journey, is starting in the classroom thinking, how can I make a difference? And then thinking, okay, I never wanted to get into management, but I ended up being in management because you feel that you can have more and more influence over what happens. And then it gets to the point where now yesterday I presented to the civil service and I presented to the DfE, because I feel that for real change to come, it seems like it has to come top down. But I'm heartened by what you said to me, is that the collection of people that you've got under the umbrella of Heads Up are very much values driven people. And from my point of view, I knew these people existed. It's just that how do you connect with these people, and how do you get them moving forward in a direction that's going to help all their staff and be part of that journey? So this is a bit of a call to action. There are things that I want to discuss after this session that I would really like to sort of bring the heads in with this, that ones that are already on that journey and thinking, how can we actually move this forward? So that's me. I didn't want to follow Diana. That's been in the back of my mind all the way through what I was talking about. And I'm thinking, should I be shouting? Should I be using some kind of analogy now? And just want to point something out to you. Diana told me about that she does keynote speech training as part of the many things she done. I've never taken her up on that, but I think it's definitely something that needs to be considered.
I think you've moved the room in a completely different way to how Diana moved the room, and I think a big round of applause for Arv, please. For one of the things that's joyous, I think, about Heads Up, and those of you that come regularly will know this, is that people really do bring their authentic selves, and it's a space where people can bring their whole selves to the room. And Arv, you've just done that and been incredibly vulnerable, and that's probably moved loads of people in the room, and it's challenging. Your messages and your thoughts are really, really challenging, and they make people reflect, and that's got to help with that journey of change. Are just really powerful. So do not feel that following Diana was any less of an impact on what you've said in the room. I think lots of people have really appreciated it, but there's some big stuff in there. You've thrown a challenge out to the room. Actually, how do we make sure it stays on the agenda, not just when we can get to it, but all of the time? And you've picked up on the point in the conversations that we've had about the people in the Heads Up network are really values aligned. I'll come back to my point is I think 95, 96, 97% of the head teachers in the system and deputy heads in the system and assistant heads in the system are values aligned. I think we need to ask some questions about how is the reductive focus, and you called it sanitization of, how is that reduction and sanitization, how is it creating this sort of hard exoskeleton around our leaders that stops them being the leaders they wanted to be? What is happening there? What's happening where it all ends up being about what's happening up here rather than being the leaders that we came to be here? Nobody put in the chat, I became a head teacher because I wanted to improve progress 8 from plus 0.1 to plus 0.3. That's all here. That's all technical, reductive. That's what our education system does. No, it's not. Our education system does 99% more than that. And if we can start to move towards that in a new normal, if we can start to refocus on what is actually important to our communities and our young people and our staff, then we can start to bring some of these things higher up the agenda and make them live there, because they're part of the education system that we want our children to be part of. So belonging isn't just something that they experience in their education system, it's something that we help them to experience and we teach them, and just really powerful messages. Thank you, Arv. We've got a bit of technical jiggery-pokery to do now, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work. So you're going to have to hang in there with me. Okay, so we have got, following Diana, leadership, Arv, belonging. What's one of the other big issues in our education system at the moment? Well-being. How are you? How are you? I asked that question at the beginning of every meeting. I wrote a blog about it 4 weeks ago. I have yet to get an honest answer to the question, how are you? We kind of get there at the Heads Up meetings. But when you ask somebody at the beginning of a meeting, how are you today? Oh, I'm okay. No, you're not. I'm going to look you in the eye. No, you're not. We're not asking each other that question because we haven't got time. We haven't got time for the answer. And if we're looking at a new normal education system, can we please look at one where well-being is not an issue? Because we are living satisfied, nourished, fulfilled lives as educators and teachers and leaders and young people in that system. We don't have to reach for the elastoplast kit to put a sticking plaster on a well-being problem, because we've dealt with it at its core. All sorts of research into young people's mental health, all sorts. It's a complex issue, massively complex. But I can't help thinking that one of the things that's contributing to it is the soulless education system that some of them experience. Young people who know at the age of 11 and 12 in secondary school that the most important thing that they can do is get good GCSE results. That's all that matters. That's all we want for you. We're going to define the first 16 years of your life with 9 numbers on a piece of paper. Seriously. That's what we're saying the first 16 years of life comes down to. So I think if we want to address well-being, we need to get upstream of the problem and we need to, it's part of this new normal. We're looking for something different. It's writ large in the Big Change Hopes thread, and it's writ large in the new normal EdBook. But Dr. Emma Kell couldn't be here with us. She's done us a video though, and this is the technical geopokery. So whilst I'm trying to make that work, please chat away in the chat room, ask questions that you'd like to come back to Diana or Arv with, and I will seamlessly now transfer us to a video world of Dr. Emma Kell. You can tell I'm not nervous, can't you?
You asked me to remind you to put the sound on, James.
I've done it, I think.
Yes, well done.
It's the wrong screen. There we go. Can you all see that? Give me a thumbs up, somebody.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Hello, everybody.
Can you hear it?
Sorry I can't be there with you in person tonight. The reason I can't be with you tonight is because I am doing my coaching course, and I'm working very hard on not overcommitting and ring fencing time for certain things. And my coaching course is a big priority for me. So I am being more otherish, as we say in our book, and putting my own needs first. And as yet, I'm unable to be in two places at once. But I did say that I would send over some questions, and the reason I thought of questions rather than answers is partly because of the coaching course I just mentioned. I spend my life, or a lot of my life it feels, telling people what to do, telling people what not to do. So I'm going to start with a basic premise, which I feel very strongly about, and then I'm going to ask you 5 questions which I'd like you either to think about individually or discuss as a group, whatever works best for you and the organisers. So the basic premise comes from a woman who's become a friend of mine called Dr. Karen Edge. And she did a piece of research with global city leaders in the US and Canada. And what the research concluded was this particular phrase, which has really stayed with me, one of the conclusions. And it was, rock bottom is not the place to climb back from. I'll say it again, rock bottom is not the place to climb back from. You take your loved ones with you. Okay? Now, I know so many teachers, so many leaders, so many TAs, so many governors, so many people on the verge of burnout at the moment. It has never been so difficult to look after ourselves. And those of us who write about it get it wrong all the time as well. There are lots of things I'm having to work on too at the moment. And I'm worried. I'm worried because I have always felt passionately about teacher wellbeing, recruitment and retention. I'm worried that, ironically, our profession is in danger of losing some of its people with the most integrity, the most sense of moral purpose, the biggest hearts. So, and we can't afford to. And we have to take responsibility for each other, of course. But we each have to take responsibility for ourselves. And as I say, it's not easy. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. The first question is, how will you know when your well-being is under threat? That's different for everybody. It's what Karen Edge again calls well-being tells. It's different for everybody. It might be that you start to forget things, for example. It might be that you, in my case, I lose my sense of humor. What is it? What are your well-being tells? How do you know that your well-being is starting to be under genuine, serious threat? Okay, so sometimes just identifying those tells in yourself, in those close to you, and actually calling them out can be incredibly powerful. My second question is, where do you go? Where do you go for quiet? Where do you go for comfort? Where do you go for support? Where do you go in your house or flat where you never think about work? It might be a corner of a room, it might be a sofa, it might be your bed. Where is there in your house where you can go and never think about work? My third question for you is, what is your next concrete step towards looking after yourself a little bit better? So what step will you take? Will you, for example, invest in a decent recipe book of nice, easy recipes to get yourself healthy food in the evenings? Will you start off on my favourite theme? I'm on week 6, Couch to 5K, and just do that little thing for yourself. So what step will you take? You might call an old friend who you haven't heard from for a long time. The 4th question is, who can help you? Who can help you? So you need at the moment more than ever to surround yourself with a supportive network. You need more than ever to keep away from what my old head used to call the toxic whinging. People are very sensitive at the moment. People are understandably snappy. People are understandably grumpy. People are scared for very good reason. So who are your go-to people? The people who make you laugh, the people who you can tell anything without judgment, the people with whom you can discuss how you're going to handle that next lesson with that Year 9 class that's been keeping you awake. Who are the people who are going to help you keep your well-being topped up? My final question is when, and this is key. This is a question that I've been working on myself. And the question is, when will you take time for you? And I'm not talking about time for your family. I'm not talking about time to tidy the house, unless that gives you great joy, in which case you're an exceptional human being. When will you take time for you to do whatever nourishes you? When we talk about this with education support, it often comes up that staring at dogs, just going to the park and staring at dogs, is what my parents have started to do to cheer themselves up during this period. What is it that you will do, and when will you do it? And I'd like you to do something concrete with this. I'd like you to actually take a colour, choose a colour. Mine's yellow, I don't know, reminds me of sunshine. Mine's yellow, and I would like you to block out times in your calendar, at least 3 times a week, even if it's only half an hour, when you will do things for you. Call the old friend that you were meant to call, experiment with a new recipe, do some cross stitch, listen to heavy metal music, whatever it takes for you. You could do your nails in a nice sparkly colour, but whatever it takes for you to feel like a human being first and a teacher second. So there are some challenges for you. I hope you have a wonderful evening. It's been a real privilege to contribute to this book, and I look forward to collaborating with you all in future, and hopefully one day meeting you in the flesh. Thank you.
Can we get a virtual round of applause in a virtual world for a virtual Emma, which is way too many virtuals, but wow, I'm just going to let that sink in a little bit, let you reflect on those. It wouldn't be a heads up event if we didn't have a bit of time where we reflected on how we look after ourselves. We do that every week. How do we look after ourselves? But just while you're doing that reflection, I'll just put some thoughts over the top of that. If you want to know more about well-being and how you can look after yourself, then please do check out the chapter in the EdBook that Emma has collated and curated and pulled together. Please do take a look at it. But a few thoughts. One of the things that we think helps, especially for head teachers, those of you that are head teachers in the room, past, present or future head teachers, tomorrow, as part of your how, where, what, who, when, every week at Heads Up, we talk about, we want you to go out into your community. We want you to make half an hour for yourself. And I want you to walk around the school for no other reason than to look at all of the great things that are happening. No other reason. It's not a Seth walk. You're not going to tell somebody off. You're not going to go and extract somebody from a classroom who's been naughty. You're not going to go and save a member of staff. You're not wiping down desks. You're not sorting out a COVID situation. You're doing none of those things. You're getting out of your office for no other reason to take a look around your school. And you're going to have a look at your school through the lens of, aren't I doing a great job? Look at this. Look at those kids having fun in that classroom. Look at that learning happening over there. Look at those 2 children interacting with each other. Look at that member of staff doing that great interaction with that child, because those are the moments of education that we're missing. They're going past us every single day in our rush and our desire to get things done, to improve stuff. We're missing out on those things. So that would be my encouragement for part of your how, where, what, who and when. Please try and find some time to do that in your exceptionally busy working life. And then the last thing I would say on that is, who is telling you that you're doing a good job? Because that's the other thing that head teachers suffer from. Nobody tells leaders they're doing a good job. Nobody tells leaders they're fabulous, Diana. So yeah, you're right, we need to tell ourselves, but it doesn't make a difference if occasionally somebody just says, great piece of work, here, have a chocolate bar. I think you led through COVID brilliantly, by the way. It would help enormously to lift the profession if we gave each other a bit of positive feedback. So look out for who's giving you that positive feedback, and look out for who are you giving positive feedback to as also part of that solution. So in the chat room, please, your thoughts on those 3 chapters: leadership, belonging, and well-being. What's resonated with you? What's made you think? What are you thinking about what could change in the future of education? What's making you think about what you can do? What's your part? Because we're not going to change it waiting for the DFE to change it, let's face it. We need to stop looking up to the DFE, the wonderful guidance they've given us through the last 9 months. We need to start looking to each other. So what can we do? And what do you want to see? What's resonated? Yeah, and if anybody wants to say it, if you're feeling brave enough in a room of 34 people to unmute yourself and shout it out, use the chat. If you're not feeling that brave, that's also absolutely fine. But if you're feeling brave enough, unmute yourself, shout out what's resonated, what's making you think, what's challenging you. Audrey. Hi, Audrey.
Hello, I'll get started. I mean, reading the stuff in the chat about how you feel that you have to be in the room the longest, you have to be in the school first, you have to be the last to leave, and then suddenly that's going to get you that badge of honor that no one gives a monkey's about. It's absolute madness. And the minute you step away from it and then you realize it's complete crackers, then you start to go, oh, it's all right. And I think until we get that balance right, it's not going to happen. And then we're going to get people burning themselves out and being rock bottom, exactly as Emma said. So I don't know. Obviously, I can't advocate that everybody leaves the system and does different things, because that's not going to work either. There'll be no captains of change if we are all sitting doing other stuff. So I think that the truth is about us adjusting our own masks. It's about us thinking to themselves, right, I'm looking after me, and whatever looks after me is different to how you look after you. But whatever you do it, and then sustain that, and then let your staff see that that is the way to be, because otherwise you're perpetuating that myth of first in, last out. Oh yeah, oh, isn't it funny that I'm really, really busy all the time? When I hear people say that now, I used to think it was a badge of honor. Now I just think, you're mad, sort out your time.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. I don't, so much of what you say resonates. I kind of think, how many of us will have the epitaph? Yeah, they worked really long days. Brilliant. I'm not sure I want that to be mine anymore. Yeah, really great point. Thank you. That has to be part of our new normal. We have to change that culture. Fantastic. Anybody else brave enough to follow in Audrey's footsteps? Of?
I'm just going to mention something, just coming from the business world. I was hoping to bring in some business practices, as the education sector seemed to be moving at a much different pace to the sector out, the business sector out there. And we always had a philosophy within our organisation, and I worked for quite a few different companies, is that if you're working so many hours, what are you doing wrong? What are you doing wrong that you have to work so many hours? You are a leader, you are a manager. What are you doing? And why aren't you looking at, is there a better way of doing it? Because if you are not fit and able and healthy mentally, physically, emotionally as a leader, how can you possibly lead your 100+ staff, if you're in a secondary school, or the staff that you've got, and the students that are within your school, if you are not at your A game every day? And you cannot be at your A game every day if you are the one that's putting in the most work. And it isn't about the amount of work you put in, it's the quality of work that you do when you're there. And I think that's one of the things that you've got to learn. And just talking as a teacher, I made a decision quite early on, and I always joke about it in terms of being the lazy teacher, is that for me to be fit and able, fit and healthy for my students, I need to be a happy individual. I could do, if there were 30 hours in the day and I didn't have to sleep, I still wouldn't get everything that I want to get done. So at some point I have to be able to draw a line and say, that is enough for me that day. That is enough for me that day. And whatever is left, I'll pick up tomorrow. And if it's important tomorrow, I'll finish that tomorrow. I mean, obviously, there's things that we have to get done, the things that might be to do with health and safety, to do with safeguarding, all those things that are a priority. But in terms of managing our daily workload, you have got to be disciplined and draw a line and say that is enough. Because if I don't draw a line, I haven't got somebody above me drawing a line for me. If I don't draw the line, no one else is going to draw the line for me. And if I don't do that, I might be able to do this for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months, but I know that I won't be here in the same state this time next year. So it's about working smarter. I know that's a cliched thing, but I know just from a secondary perspective, there seems to be a glut of deputies, assistant heads, associate assistant heads, associate assistant heads, where they're trying to put structures in to help people develop. Why should the person at the helm of the ship be you said, Audrey, that badge of honor that isn't a badge of honor, being the first in, the last out, always walking around looking busy, always trying to solve a problem, always trying to do that? Why is that you doing it? And is that healthy? That's, from a health point of view, it's not good. From a management point of view, it's definitely not a good thing, because it just shows that you're not managing.
Great stuff. Thank you, Arthur. I see lots of comments in the chat that are agreeing with you and what you're saying. Mandy, I think one last point from you, Mandy. You had your hand up, and then we'll come to Justin and Alakshi and perhaps talk a little bit about the EdBook and what the aims are and the desires are for it. But Mandy, over to you.
Thank you. All I was going to say is thank you so much for the contributions today, Dana, Anav, and the virtual Emma. Absolutely fantastic. And what it boils down to me is leadership, and what our perceptions of leadership is, and what it is for, and what education is for. And I think when we've figured that out, then everything else will fall into place.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mandy. That's fantastic. Well, look, you know, I'm sort of we're going to draw to a close quite shortly, but if you've been provoked, excited, it's made you think, these sessions this evening, they are just a part of the New Normal EdBook. Diana's chapter on leadership, ours on belonging, Emma's on well-being. Heads Up are taking the space of the future of education. Education 2030, what's that going to look like? We're taking ownership of that chapter. If there are other chapters that you'd like to take a look at, you've had the chance to take a look at it, and you want to contribute to, the great thing about the EdBook is you can contribute to it. It's not a static published book, it's an evolving piece that's a reference point for people in education. So if you feel like you want to contribute, then please do. But Justin, is there anything you'd like to add about your desires and the aims and what you're looking to for the EdBook to achieve?
Thanks, James. Thanks, Kate, for allowing us to come along this evening, and Arv and Diana for your amazing sort of stories and talks. Just a quick 2 seconds on where the EdBook has come from. It's kind of come from some of the great stuff that we've seen over the education space in the past sort of 6-7 months, which is collaboration. It's one of the real positive things that's come out of the COVID lockdown, and then what's happening post that. We've put together the EdBook as a collaborative document. We've currently got, I don't know, 20 odd experts that have been writing different chapters and different pieces within it. And we're getting ready to start launching the book out into the education sector as a whole over the course of the next few months. This is a great forum for us because everyone within this community is about looking at change. We see that the opportunities in front of us now, the burning bridge that we've got in terms of the amount of change that we've had to go through in such a short period of time, creates that opportunity to start moving things forward. So there's lots of stuff in the EdBook which we'd like people to come on board and comment and share and get involved in the discussions. Although we're housing it within our technical platform because we've got the technical capabilities to do it, it's a document that's been created for the education sector, not by a pogo. So it's been created by our experts for the sector as a whole. So people can take the links, share it around, and utilize the good stuff that's in it. I'll pass you over to Anilakshi just talk you through a few things that we'd like your help on as well.
Hi, everybody. James and Kate for having us here, and what a privilege to be part of this evening's session. I really thank all of you for your contributions. And now, from my side and on managing the EdBook, I wish all of these contributions I can take onto the EdBook. Your voice really is very, very powerful, and looking at the discussions, the comments, the questions, and the conversations going forward is something that we need in the EdBook. There's a whole lot of chapters that were created by the people that have contributed to it. But if there's anything else that you think is a burning issue, such as perhaps a parent's voice, a child's voice, anything in safeguarding, SEND, whatever it is that should be answered from an education perspective, please let us know, and we're happy to take that forward with you. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for having us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Anilakshi. So I think just to provide a mechanism for that, so if you haven't looked at the EdBook in advance of tonight's session, if you could look at it afterwards, it's a resource for the education system, by the education system, for the education system. And I think probably the best way of channeling that is if you do have thoughts about how it could develop or how it could, you know, what's great about it, let's do appreciative inquiry. What's great about it? What really works? What helps you? But then let's also have a think about those things that you think could be looked at in terms of adding a chapter that you'd like to see, a chapter you'd like to write or contribute to. Then probably the best thing to do is to channel that through HeadsUp. Kate, are you happy for that to come through the support at HeadsUp? HeadsUp4HTs.co.uk email. So please do use that and feed that through, and we can pass that information on to Justin and Anilakshi at a pogo. And look at that, bang on time. You know what, it's a typical first one of these that we've done. We Kate and I were talking earlier on today and sort of going, oh, do you think we've got enough? What happens if we finish with 55? People will be all right if we finish early, won't they? But you've all been such great contributors, and it's obviously difficult in such a big space. We're not in a physical room together to get the conversations going, but you've done that brilliantly in the chat. So thank you ever so much for that. Great big thank you and a round of applause from everybody, please, again, for Diana and Arv and the virtual Emma Kell. Thank you for your contributions and your inputs. We really hope this is the first of a very different sort of style of session for us. If you want to join us on this in the support sessions on a Saturday morning, and from now on every other Wednesday, what we call our Wednesday evening drinks and our Saturday coffee mornings, there are loads of faces in the room who join those. As Diana says, bring a friend, please. Not one single person who comes to those meetings leaves and goes, that wasn't really good for my heart and my soul. So actually, do you know what? If you know a leader out there who could do with that supportive conversation as well, no judgment, honest space, transparent, fun, relaxed, informal, inspiring, then please do bring them along. The Heads Up Network, everything we do is free. We don't charge any money for it. If you know somebody who is in need of crisis coaching, please point them in our direction. We will provide it. If you know somebody who could benefit from those support networks, we've just set up a head teacher buddying system to help people through this difficult time. So Kate is busy pairing head teachers up with other head teachers to offer them support. So we want to support head teachers in whatever way we can, and we don't charge a penny. Okay, so because that is accessible, and that means we can offer that support for everybody. Thank you for everybody for contributing this evening. Thank you for giving up your Wednesday evening. I hope you enjoyed a nice drink. That's still 4/5 full, which is most unusual for me. But I hope you enjoyed a drink of whatever floats your boat, cup of tea, cup of coffee, glass of wine, soft drink, whatever it was. You've all been amazing, amazing listeners, amazing participants, and I thank you all dearly. And have a wonderful the rest of your week. Have an appreciative, enjoyable rest of your week. And thank you very much.